So today I'm joined by Oliver, founder of eAA. It's a PR and campaigning agency specializing also in education and assessment. So Oliver, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Would
you.
you
Nice
like
to be here.
to, yeah, thank you. Would you like to start by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
Of course, yeah. Well, I started Gillibie, which is my small PR agency here in the UK in 2013, and that was off the back of an already quite long career, always in agencies. I've been a PR man my whole career, and I'd already built up quite a specialism by 2013 in particularly education and academia, and a lot of my sort of legacy client relationships were specifically in skills, licensure, certification, and of course assessment. So I have been coming to the eAA events for 20 years now. It pains me to admit. And, built some enduring relationships and some great friendships, and had the privilege of working with a lot of the organizations and the characters that you will have met in the room and learned so much. And as I've always said, it's an industry I keep coming back to because I find it particularly rewarding. I like the people. I like the fact that what everybody has in common in the room is that they're very mission oriented. They are truly working towards a greater good. There is a lot of social value, a lot of social impact in the world of educational assessment. And, you're working with decent people whose motivations come from the right place.
But it's a great community to be part of.
Very much so. Absolutely.
So as you mentioned, you were part of eAA a few weeks ago as well, and apparently for 20 years.
Yeah, amazing. I wasn't on stage 20 years ago. I was a child back then, of course. But I have been going for 20 years on and off, and it's always lovely to see so many familiar faces and meet new people as well.
Actually, your talk was one of the talks that was talked about the most.
Thank you. Yeah. Pleased to hear it.
You talked about indeed the toxicity, political toxicity in assessment and education, and also how I remember you were talking about how it's digital assessments are portrayed as risky, being more open to fraud. So they kind of want to go back to paper. So what do you think of that? Because don't you think digital helps with scalability? It can also be reliable when you do it correctly.
This is the thing. The evidence exists, and ironically, 20 years ago, when I first started working with Jeff, my co-speaker on the day, who I worked with in many different capacities, 20 years ago, Jeff and I first started working together in an agency-client relationship, and in those days, we were doing marketing and PR in e-assessment, and even 20 years ago, our narrative was, this isn't new. This technology is tried, it's tested, it's proven in use in the biggest, most high stakes environments in the world, in some of the most litigious countries in the world, where, they know the stakes are high, they're doing it, they're proving it. So, the evidence to support us is all there. And if it wasn't new 20 years ago, I mean, certainly now, and as Jeff said on stage, we've got all the proof in abundance that digital assessment methods are fairer, more valid, more robust, secure, whatever the sort of the measure you want to apply, whatever you're trying to achieve. We know, everybody in the room at the eAA conference knows and can prove that the technology is already there. We have it at our disposal. And then that goes back to Paul Muir's summary of the point. It's not about having the best technology, but it's about how do you justify it? How do you present that narrative? Because as Jeff pointed out in the talk, it doesn't matter that all the evidence is there when our opponents are, as I said before, well-funded, well-platformed. Why, it only takes one sort of semi-informed spokesperson in, I don't know, the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is often held up as an example of one of the sort of opponents that we've occasionally found ourselves up against, because, the Daily Mail has a political agenda, of course it does. And the Daily Mail has often, and others like it, in the years gone by, taken a position that we don't want robots in the classroom. We don't want the future of our children determined by robots. It's a compelling rhetoric.
The fear, yeah, indeed.
the fear. It's very easy to present technology as risky.
Would you then agree if you get your technology provider, not only like a solution provider, but maybe as your partner from beginning to the end, then you set your goals, then you look at your exam context and see what you need. And then if you can kind of make a to-do list and work on it together. For example, fraud, they're afraid that fraud will increase if you go digital. However, if you know your exam context and if you need whatever tools that you need in place, if you can set those together, then wouldn't that help?
Well, here's the thing, and fraud's a great example. We know, I know from personal experience of working with some of the biggest and best providers in the industry, that the anti-fraud technologies and techniques are doing a brilliant job. But when it comes to getting into a public spat in the eye of the media, in the public eye, if one of our detractors says in a newspaper interview or says in the House of Commons or wherever the battleground, if one of our detractors casually and without supporting evidence says, oh, digital assessment is known to be open to abuses and fraud, we as an industry are not very good at fighting back because, and I understand this, the people who are actually doing a brilliant job on the front line of combating fraud aren't allowed to talk about it. And I get that. Commercially, they don't want to be giving away sensitive information, not to mention the regulatory and contractual restrictions that are placed on them. So talk to the biggest players in the world. What are you actually doing to combat fraud? I know for a fact, as I'm sure do you, that they're doing a brilliant job. Their anti-fraud technology, their people, their methods are superb. But they're not allowed to go to that same newspaper and in that same spotlight stand up and say, well, actually, that's not true, and here's the evidence.
Yeah.
I've been in those rooms where we are handling PR for these brands, and the brands, it's not a level playing field.
Yeah.
So we need to think, okay, well, what can we do? How can we talk about this issue without naming names or without breaching confidences or anything like that? It's not easy. That's not to say that it's impossible. There is a lot that can be done in terms of, okay, maybe it's an uneven playing field. Maybe right now there is an imbalance in the narrative, and maybe right now our enemies do have a louder voice and a bigger audience than we do. And maybe, there are vested interests that are very well funded and want it to stay that way. That doesn't mean we roll over and do nothing, right? And that was kind of the call. That was the call to action that Jeff and I were bringing, which was to say, look, there are people in this industry doing really clever PR to rebalance the narrative a little bit and to tell their side of the story.
Maybe a last question. If you had to name one thing that will define the digital assessment industry, where it's heading in the next 5 years, what would that be?
One thing that will define it, or one thing that should?
Both.
I do. Okay. Well, I think. I am certainly not qualified to comment on where the industry is on that sort of maturity curve, but I do know that the industry is sufficiently established and sufficiently mature globally that campaigning, the time is right for campaigning. The time is right for alliances and collaborations and advocacy and all of these buzzwords that you hear PR agencies talking about. But that's where I think the big opportunity is. And we're seeing it already. We're seeing it happening. I mean, there's a brilliant spirit in the room at eAA, you'll have seen it, of entities that on paper look like they ought to be competitors. They often have a similar proposition. They might sort of make similar claims. Their branding and their marketing, to the untrained eye, it looks like they're just fighting over one another for the same piece of the pie. But in reality, when you go around the room and talk to people, there are lots of alliances and partnerships and channel collaborations and referrals. And there's a lot of business done within the community. And I think by extension, what will happen next is that will extend to campaigning. And this is something that I'm always trying to encourage. I'm always trying to encourage clients, whether they're private entities, or whether they're bodies or groups, is to look for those alignments of purpose and look for where the alliances might be, and who your advocates and ambassadors might be. And those are the most powerful ingredients of a campaign. And even if your objective is purely commercial, you just want to sell a product to more people, you're still going to do a better job of that if you open up your doors to if you have that mindset of being collaborative. And we're seeing it already. Like I say, eAA is a great example of a community where people are, yes, everybody in the room is in a competitive environment. And yes, we often find ourselves competing for a piece of business, but by the same token, they're all open to conversations about how we can help each other.
Yeah.
And of course, my biased answer to that is campaigning.
Yep. So leadership will be very important, as Jeff said when we had our talk with him. And
yes,
right now, everyone
right.
is discussing, like, where is this assessment of knowledge is heading? How will it be assessed in 5 years? You've talked about AI. These are the questions that I think everyone has in mind. So do you think this is the community that will influence that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that question there, which is an operational question, how is the assessment of skills, knowledge, and competencies going to be done in 5 years' time? Of course, I'm not qualified to answer that question. That would be my clients who would be the subject matter experts. But I think, back to your point, one thing that is absolutely certain, the answer is in that room.
Yeah.
It's the people in that room, between them, have all the answers to that.
Yeah.
Because everything we saw people talking about 20 years ago came true.
Like
these
prophets.
are the most. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, Jeff and I didn't get on stage and make any prophecies. Ours was more of a call to. Ours was more of a rallying cry, which was to get the industry thinking about PR and communications and campaigning, because of the current landscape requiring it.
Well, it was super interesting. Oliver, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate you taking the time being here. It was, again, great talking to you.
It was lovely meeting you. Yeah, me too. It was really nice meeting you at the event and lovely to catch up afterwards. And I'm sure this is by no means the last of the. I mean, I've been very busy myself with follow-up conversations since the event with people that I met and people I reconnected with on the day. And that's another great thing about the event, is it sparks conversations that then turn into actions.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. And I'll see you next time.
Look forward to it. Cheers. Take care.